Hello, everybody. It's Stephen and Walter here for another episode of So Chatty. Walter says he doesn't want to do this.
Oh, I know.
What,
Anyway, I just
whatever.
always seem to be a rush on Friday to do them. But anyway,
What's the big rush?
I don't know.
Well, yeah, I know. For you, you've only just started your day.
Yeah, well,
Well, I've been up since 5, so, like heaven forbid. Anyways, as I was saying, welcome to another episode of So Chatty, episode 81 for November the 11th, Remembrance Day, 2022. So, today we're going to talk about the usual stuff, start off with projects and things, and then we're going to talk about our creative evolution. What we used to do way, way, way back when we were like younger, a lot younger, like kids and whatnot, that eventually ended up in what we do now. So, anyways, before we do that, let's talk about what I've been working on. Well, let's talk first about what Walter's been working on. What have you been working on?
oh, I've been started embroidering my bags. I was actually going to bring it down.
Oh, that's painful. Oh, you mean your Christmas bags?
Yeah,
Okay, never mind. What, you were going to bring it down, but you didn't.
yeah, I forgot.
Well, something to see next week,
Okay.
if not sooner. With that, yeah, we're both madly making Christmas totes at the moment. Of course, I have a tendency to be a little minor too busy, according to Walter. Not really, don't have any pictures to show you yet. I'll show those all on an episode of Idiot Quilter because I'm in the process of making them or whatnot. But Walter will do very fancy bags. Mine are very simple totes. They're quilted, but I just did big yardage on my Lucy, quilted them up, and now I'm embroidering the fronts of them and putting them together. They're very simple. They're lined tote bags. Walter's will be designer. They'll be for special people. Mine are for people I don't like. No, not really. Be careful. Somebody might be watching us and they'll get one. Oh, you don't like me. You gave me one of those bags. Yeah, okay, fine. You're not Walter worthy. Okay. You have to be Walter worthy. Anyways, been working on that. I've been working on the block of the month that I've been working on since March. It's just about done, except I pulled my hair out yesterday. Yeah, I did get a haircut though. Um, because I put together the 4 borders wrong. And it wasn't from lack of reading the instructions. It has to do with the colors that I picked and all the little pieces that go into it. So I spent most of yesterday ripping out things, getting them rearranged. I was going nuts trying to figure out which way what thing went because, I'm geometrically challenged. This will make more sense when I show it to you, but I'm not showing it to you today either because it's not ready to be shown.
Didn't you also have a complication that you almost ran out of fabric?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, one of the last pieces, I needed 4.25 inch squares of this one color. I did not have enough fabric. And I was pretty sure I wouldn't be able to get any more of this fabric. I scrounged. I call it stitching on fumes because I grabbed every tiny little scrap and made those blocks up, those squares up with multiple pieces, little pieces. So, I mean, when the quilt is finished, you won't be able to tell that unless you really studied it. But yeah. And we were over at Ultimate Sewing too earlier in the week. Um, and I asked over there, Donna, the hostess with the mostest, because it's her class I'm taking, said, "You don't happen to have any more of this, do you?" She's like, "I think we do." No, they did have more of that style of fabric, but they didn't have the color. They had 2 colors close to it, but the way this quilt is, the pattern is
Yeah,
designed for
and
this, you would notice.
I had some of that fabric, but it was the wrong shade as
Yep,
well.
the wrong
So,
shade. And so now maybe if I'd scrounged through all of my scrap drawers, I might have been able to find some more, but they wouldn't be that big a piece. But I made it. I managed to make it. So it's fine. It is fine. But I'm going to be glad when this quilt's done because I'm done with it. 8 months kind of a thing. So anyways, I'll show that soon. I'm getting back to work on the Mosaic Stars by Stephanie Stitches. Actually, I was just working on some of that before we went to air today. It's going to be a nice quilt. I've just been waylaid by a few other projects, so I've kind of put that quilt on the back burner, but I got to get back at it and get that done. Yeah, so no pictures of any of these things because there's really nothing to show you with these things because they're all works in progress. But there'll be stuff maybe next week on the Idiot Quilter, at least for my stuff. Maybe Walter will have something to show on Stephen and Walter Live on Sunday. We shall see. Okay, so tomorrow we're going off to a sew day at our local club. For those of you that are regulars, you know Walter went off to one of those. Was that a month
September,
or so ago?
right?
Was it September? Is that when it was? Yeah, it might
Yeah,
have
because
been.
I couldn't go to the October one because you were having the quilt retreat.
Oh,
And
right.
so, yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, yeah, I'm going to this time. This is something that's done by the guy who teaches the classes Walter takes online. You've heard us talk about Brandon before, and some of the people in his class, and there'll be a few extra people there too. It could be a really interesting crowd, and I don't know if I'm going to get anything on video or pictures or whatnot. It's going to really depend on the mood that's there, because this is in our local gay club and they get the hall for that, for this event. And like it doesn't cost any of us anything because the hall is free. And um, some of the other people that are come are, well, make a lot of interesting costumes because some of them are drag queens. So they're, it's not easy to buy clothes for a drag queen off the rack. They need to be custom. And
They're full-figured
yeah,
girls.
full-figured girls, kind of a thing. And also the most of the kinds of things that drag queens wear are usually over the top. So, you need to customize. And hey, there you go. You could make some of it. You maybe get a business going here making drag outfits. They wouldn't be able to afford you.
Well, look at the amount of fabric you'd have to use for one of those.
Yeah, I know. There's a few big bruisers there for that. Yeah. Hello, would you like a tent? We'll put a little trim on the bottom and call it a gown.
Even the fat lady stores won't work for them.
Yeah. Yeah. But that, and I mean, there was one guy last time, he was making some leather goods, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
Restraints and a few things. Anyways, interesting, different kind of sew day. That's why I kind of want to go. I think I'll be the only quilter in the crowd, but it seems to be an eclectic group. So we shall see. Anyway, so sorry about that. I did mention that if I didn't go, it would be a pop-up sew day, but I am going. So yeah. Okay, now quick tip. Just discovered this week. Well, it's not something I've discovered. I've known about this before, but I haven't had this problem before. You know that I buy my pre-wound bobbins from Montville.ca, and I buy them in a box of 144 for like 26 bucks, which is a bargain, and they're great. They work in my embroidery machine. They work in my sewing machine. Walter uses them. They are excellent. But I think there was one batch that I must have got that were overwound. Now, why is that a problem? Well, what happens if they're overwound, you may not notice it at first when you put it in your sewing machine or in your embroidery machine, but then loops of thread kind of slide off the spool while you're working with it, and that can wreak havoc for you. You get a huge bird's nest underneath, to say the least. And this was happening. I was getting these bird's nests frequently. So after every time pretty much I put in a new bobbin. I also noticed that when I grabbed a bobbin out of the box, there'd be a lot of thread pooling off of it, sort of a thing. So what I was doing, and I remember this, Shirley, the owner of Ultimate Sewing, had told me about this at one time. Basically, if you have an overwound bobbin, you just unwind some of it, a few meters of it, so that it's staying on the bobbin. It's not over the edge of the bobbin, kind of a thing. And that solves your problem. I mean, no big deal.
Apparently, Janome bobbins that you can get Janome pre-wound bobbins. Apparently, they have a big problem with them. So if anybody is using a Janome pre-wound bobbin and you're finding you're having a lot of problems with that at the beginning, try and take a few meters of thread off.
Take about 10 meters or so of thread off it. Now, for some of you, you're going to say, but that's a waste.
Yeah, I know.
Well, yeah, it is. It is, but it's a waste if you're getting a bird's nest, and it's a waste of your time if you're jamming up and worse things too. So anyways, I did write to Johnny, the owner of Montville, or manager of Montville. I'm not sure which he is. I've talked to Johnny before. He's great with customer service. Now, I wasn't really complaining because this wasn't something that they did. And like I said, it's an easy enough problem to fix. And I'm not that worried about a little bit of thread that I'm
Oh,
wasting.
those bobbins are pretty inexpensive to
Well, yeah,
purchase.
so that, but I thought maybe he'd like to know because, he might get some people who have never bought pre-wound bobbins before and they don't understand what this problem is. And they might, contact him and say, look, your bobbins suck. They're all causing problems in my machine and that kind of thing. So, anyways, he wrote back to me and thanked me for it. He says, yes, sometimes that happens. You get overwhelmed once from the factory. And I had told him what I did. And he says, but he says, just hang on to this email, he said, and the next time you order some, just send along a copy of the email. And he said, we'll send you out a free box. Well, I wrote back and said, well, that's really nice of you, but I'm not going to do that. I wasn't looking for a free box because they're not really defective. And I just thought he'd like to know. But, see, that's the kind of customer service you get from Montville. That's why I go to them all the time. So, anyways, if you run into a problem like that, you might want to check your bobbin.
Especially if you put in a new pre-wound bobbin.
Yeah, well, it only happens.
Any kind.
Yeah.
If you're getting bird's nests and stuff like that right off the start, do what Steve says, like take a few meters off the front of the bobbin and try it again.
Yeah. And so what? It's only a few meters of thread. It's only thread. Thread's not that expensive. And
those bobbins tend to hold a lot of thread because they're usually a 60 weight thread. So.
Yeah. So anyways, so I just thought we'd pass that tip on. And the other thing, I did buy a new toy. I am going to do a more extensive review of this new toy that I bought. It's by a company called Vivilux. They make a bunch of products. They make standalone magnifiers, what do you call it, task lights, things like that. They are usually, all of them are rechargeable through a USB connection. And they also have this one that's a laser. Now, I've seen this before, but what's her name? Becky on Power Tools with Thread was at the Quilt Market or whatever down in Houston recently. And she was going around to all the different booths, and she stopped at this booth and she talked to the guy who's the owner of this, and he was showing this particular thing. And I thought, this might be not a bad thing to try. And it's not. But the problem is, it's in US dollars. It's a US product, and shipping's from the US. So I went on Amazon. And yes, Amazon had it. And you can see right here, I've got the Amazon page up. This is the Canadian one. It's not actually, that's not the price I paid for it. You have to watch Amazon. They had it for $70, not $79, when I ordered it 2 weeks ago. It took 2 weeks to get it. Even though it was supposedly on Prime on Amazon. Oh, it still says now there's 9 left in stock. When I got it, there was only 1 left in stock.
Well, they may have restocked.
Well,
and the other thing is, depending on where it's coming from, it could have to do with fluctuation of the currency.
Yeah,
between
maybe
countries. But I do know that Amazon on occasional, used to be a long time ago, that if you logged in at different times of the day, various times prices could fluctuate on the same item several times.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of watch that on Amazon.
Yeah. But anyways, I got this the other day and tried it out. What it essentially does is you can attach it. There's just Velcro strips. You can attach it to your sewing machine, point the little head down that you see there, and there's a laser light. It creates a red line. Now they have them in red line and they have them in green line. The green line were a little bit more expensive, and I was going to order the green line, even though it was a little bit more money. A lot of people claim that they can see it better if it's the green line. But for some reason on Amazon, they said I could get the red line, but they couldn't ship to my area for the green line one. Same company, same product, just one's a red light, one's a green light. So I don't know why that was. But anyways, so I ordered the red line one. And yeah, if you wanted to focus the light down across the table of your sewing machine, and you say you're doing half square triangles or something like that, a lot of people don't have a 1/4 inch foot. They'll use tape masking tape built up on the side of their by the side of their needle. They've measured out the 1/4 inch and go from there. But that stuff starts to peel up after a while. So you can use this. It'll focus down onto it and line it up. And if you want to line other things up, I really don't know. I can't think at the top of my head what else I would use it to line up. But it has a straight line. It has a dot thing. They just screw on to the end, and one that just gives you crosshairs. And they give you some little crosshair tape. Now, I know that on certain Brother machines, their embroidery machines, there is a system with them where it uses a laser light and you can focus it onto this crosshair piece of tape or something they have to get alignment, I guess, for those that want to try and actually quilt a quilt on it or do other things. I've never worried about that with mine. But anyways, I tried it out. Yes, it works. But I don't need it. Not for doing straight line, because I have a 1/4 inch foot that works really well for that. So for me, this isn't any real great advantage. However, then you say, well, why'd you buy it? Because it's a toy. You know, because I thought I might be able to use it in certain circumstances for lining up things or whatever. Anyways, I have it. It works. I need to explore a little further, see if I can find some YouTube videos to see how people are really using this thing. Actually, I should probably go to the company's website. Maybe they've got some in the whole bit. But they have some other products too that look quite interesting. So I'm not complaining about this. For me, probably not going to get a lot of use out of it, but for other people, it probably would, and it does work. Okay, so those were the things we want to just general housekeeping kind of things back to us. So I was thinking, here we are. Well, I am 65 years old. Walter's still just a baby at 64, but he's coming up to 65, only a couple of months away. So, you know, how did we ever get to this point where we're sewing, embroidery, quilting, all that kind of stuff? Because I certainly didn't think about doing that when I was a kid, but I was a very creative kid. And do you consider yourself a creative kid?
So at times, yeah.
Yeah, well, you're a tinkerer. Whatever. We both probably tinkered in different ways, but anyways, we thought we'd talk a little bit about other things, because we have done other creative things before we ever got into what we're doing now. I thought you might be interested in that kind of thing. If you're not, bye-bye. Because that's what we're talking about. So, first thing I thought we'd talk about is what we did as kids and what were our creative influences. So, I think I'm talking about creative play. You know, when we were kids, there weren't any video games or computers or cell phones. Probably only got about 3 channels if we were lucky on television. Most of the time, our parents were kicking us outside to play. You're not going to sit there in front of that television set all day. Get outside, get some fresh air. Don't come home till the street lights come on. Of course, your family probably didn't get up until around midday.
No.
So
my parents my mom would get up at, not at 5, but more like 8 or 9. So
slept in. Yeah.
Well, she would never let me sleep in. I'd get up at 7 to try and watch cartoons or something like that, and she'd send me back to bed.
Oh.
She didn't want to get up that early.
Well, anyways, so how did you, as a kid? No, I'm saying kid, I mean, you know, under 12 years of age. What kept you amused?
Well, I don't know. We used to go out and play on the street and all that other stuff, and just like other kids, yeah, you know, hide and seek, stuff like that, right? And I mean, I really didn't do anything too creative as a kid, but my dad bought me a mechano set, right? And I didn't really know how to use it. Maybe I was a little young at for a time, but you know, my dad would build little items and on the mechano set and help me with projects with that. So that was kind of how I got more into mechanical stuff.
Did you have Tinker toys?
Yeah, I think I had those ones where the sticks and rods and the wheels and all that, right? Yeah, I did that too. And I used to always play with Lego too, and put weird houses together. Actually, what I used to like to do is put a house together and then drown it in water because I had a thing for water. So,
Okay.
anyway, so I probably would have set it on fire if I did.
These are things that horror movies are made of.
But anyway, so that's sort of me. And but I was exposed to a lot of crafts, right?
Okay.
Because my dad was a painter, but he wasn't just a house painter. He went to school for it over in Europe, and he knew how to color his own paints. So he had all these different colors and powder, and he would be able to concoct his own colors in the basement type thing.
Of course,
And
toxic
he
waste.
would also know how to. He was very talented, and he knew how to make a cheap piece of wood look like an expensive piece of wood or something like that by using stains in a creative way. And he was very good at building things and stuff like that. So I saw that side of like my dad doing that sort of thing, being creative at building things. I still have a desk I use upstairs that he built me as for when I was a kid going to school. And
It has a map on it.
and yeah, he bought a piece. Actually, it's actually a collector's item
Yeah,
map
because it's got
because
USSR on it, doesn't it?
yeah, it's a map of the world, and in what is the stuff that's countertops are made of, and it's got the old USSR the way it used to be and everything.
Did he buy it that way?
Yeah,
That
he
kind
bought
of-
it.
yeah.
It was he didn't make it. You could buy that
Hmm.
at a local like the equivalent of Home Depot or whatever, a local building supply place.
Beaver lumber.
I think it was millwork at the time. But anyway, so he did that sort of thing. My mom, on the other hand, would sewed some things herself. Like she sewed. My mother was a heavy woman, and she always had a hard time finding dresses that would fit her. So she would sew dresses for herself on her crank sewing machine using the hand crank. And
This is the universal symbol for hand crank sewing machine.
yeah. So anyway, I used to sit and watch her. Actually, I used to help her cut out the patterns. Like I'd help her pin them and cut them out, cut the fabric. She had put me to work, cut the fabric out for her.
Did your mother call that Dutch sweatshop?
Yeah. So anyway, so I never sewed anything together, but I watched her sew, and I helped her. I used to find the bobbin winder fascinating, and I used to help her wind the bobbins and stuff like that. So that was interesting. And my mother also crocheted, and she crocheted and she knitted a lot. And so she knitted some sweaters. Actually, I still have a sweater of hers that she knitted me and stuff like that. So my sisters, she taught my sisters how to sew, and they really were always into sewing as well. So I was exposed to that kind of stuff.
Did you build things?
Not really. My dad started a project one year with I was supposed to build the birdhouse with him. Well, he built the birdhouse and I watched.
No. Well, why was that? Was that because your father wanted to do it all himself because he was afraid that you would screw it up, or was that just because you just didn't want to do it?
Well, I think my dad was a bit of a perfectionist, and I think he didn't think that I would build it as well as he did. So, but anyway, we went through the process of it, and I watched him do it. And I mean, obviously, I picked up something from it. So, that sort of thing. And I would go down to his workshop every once in a while when I needed to do something and tinker with something. So
did you experiment?
Yeah, a little bit.
What did you experiment on?
Well, I don't know. Sometimes with electricity.
Oh, I did.
Well,
that
he had this. Was it converter? One that converts AC to DC voltage and transformer. And so I'd go down and test, light bulbs and stuff like that on it to make sure they were.
Well, that explains why you have all those battery testers now in the house.
So, and just odds and ends. I would do on my own sometimes when I needed to do something, and my dad was always somebody that would see a problem, and he'd sit there and try and think how to correct it. And I think I got that from him because I do the same thing.
Yeah,
So
you do for days.
yeah.
He sits in a trance.
So anyway, yeah. So that's sort of my background. My background's a Dutch background, and my parents immigrated to Canada in 1954, and established themselves in Canada. But my mom had the old she was taught how to do crochet and knit and everything. And
Well, she was a woman. That's what
yeah,
women learned. That was part of the
yeah.
training for a girl, back in the 30s and the 40s or 20s or whatever kind of a thing.
I mean, my parents gave me. I remember my mom gave me one time. I saw that she had an interest in knitting. She gave me one year one of those things, those round things that you have like the pegs
Oh,
in
yeah,
them,
yeah, yeah.
right? And that you knit a tube of it, right? So
But you never know what to do with the tube after.
yeah, I
You just
know.
have the stupid
You
tube.
just have this big
We
tube,
used to make those at school. Used to get
yeah,
a wooden spool
yeah,
and put 4 nails in it.
yeah.
And
Well,
then
I started with
yeah.
that. Actually, that's really basically what she did. They did. I
Well, it's
got a
kind
spool
of
with
a
it.
knitting machine, because that's how a knitting
Yeah,
machine
yeah,
works, basically. A little bit more hooks on it, but
yeah.
in the whole bit. Oh,
So like
I
that's
should
sort
make
of a
one of those.
crafty little thing and stuff like that. So it's kind of
We
interesting.
should bring that back.
Yeah.
There's probably some wooden spools around here. I don't know.
I don't know if we have any
Well,
wooden
I had a
spools.
whole bunch, but I don't know if I gave those away in the big purge.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah.
Idea.
So
Well, before you go on from that, so that was your earliest. We'll go into teen years in a bit, but yeah, some of the things you said. See, I think creativity skipped generation in my family because my grandmothers, both of them, were very creative people. My grandmother Bland, my father's mother, she could paint and she could do woodwork and she did all kinds of stuff and she loved to tinker and experiment with stuff. She especially loved tinkering with electronics because I'll never forget when she got her first cassette tape recorder. Well, she was taping everything under the sun with that. And she was not a young woman when she got one of those. Well, okay, she didn't seem like a young woman to me now. She probably was in her 40s or something, or 50s. But and then my other grandmother was constantly making something. She knit, she crocheted, she did needlework, she did hand embroidery, and of course she quilted too, although I never remember seeing her ever quilt with that. But then my mother and my father, my mother was creative. They were both creative in their own way, but not creative in the way that a lot of people would think. My mother, she loved to decorate her house. She especially loved Christmas. Like she would start decorating in November, at the beginning of November for Christmas. And she loved doing that. And in later years, she loved to do, fake floral arrangements. And then she started taking old insulators that my father would bring home because my father was a power line contractor. And he'd come home with insulators, things on top of the hydro lines. And there were some very unusual ones, and my mother'd make them into lovely vases.
or centerpieces,
Yeah,
floral arrangements, or
they were, well, they weren't ugly. They just, it was kind of an aesthetic that you had to appreciate somehow, whatever it was. But anyway, yeah, she was fairly like that way, but not like my grandmothers were. But I love to experiment with things. And Walter's talking about electricity. Yeah, race car sets. Used to have a lot of race car sets as I was growing up. And a race car set would only last about a couple of weeks because the little brushes, they called them brushes. They were hooked to the little electric motor. They're on the front of the little car, and those touched a metal rod or a couple of metal wires or something on the track, and power went through it, and that's how they worked. Well, those things would always wear out, so I was constantly fixing those when I was a little kid. But then I eventually got to the point where they wouldn't work anymore, so I yanked the motors out and I hooked them up to transformers. I had a lot of transformers, and and I'd make little pulley systems where things, you push a button, little things would drop from the ceiling and back up and stuff. I mean, they were completely useless, but they taught me about electricity. And I got one lesson once in grade 9. I made a computer. Well, it wasn't a computer, it was for a presentation. So I covered a cardboard box with foil, with actually a very colored foil. And I used an old string of Christmas tree lights, the old fashioned ones with the big balls. And I had punched holes in the cardboard at the front, put the socket in behind the cardboard, and put in the screwed in the lights, right? Plugged it in and all lit up. Well, I said to my father, the day before I was going to take it to school for this presentation I had to do, I said to my father, I said, Dad, every time I plug this in, it feels like it's vibrating, the box. It doesn't move, I said, but if you put your hand on it, it feels like there's something going on. Father says, let me check this out. So my father got out his voltmeter. And yeah, he says, well, that's because there's 110 volts going through this box, but you're grounded. So that's why, because it was a cement floor in the workshop in my parents' house where I was building this thing. He said, so that's why you're not getting the shock off it, but that's why you can feel it, because it's the electricity going across the top of it. Because when I punched the bulbs through in the socket, some of the tin foil that was lining the box got in there and it was making a connection. Now, here's the thing. It was a good thing I mentioned it to him, because at school we had steel desks and we wouldn't have been grounded. And that might have, I wonder if I'd get an A if I killed everybody in the classroom. Here, touch my box. Kind of a thing. But I played with electricity all the time. My father had electric eyes that were meant for street lights, and he'd bring those home. I'd hook them up, and I'd use those to make things and hold it. So I wonder I didn't kill myself, because I was always playing with electricity. It fascinated me. But I did that. I experimented with things. I had a mechano set too, and I tinker toys. We didn't have Legos. We had knockoffs.
Yeah, we had Legos that we imported from Europe, and it can't. They weren't a proper box. It was a small set, and it was.
Well, when we were little kids, Legos were not something that were popular here yet. And if you could get them, they were extreme. Well, they're still
yeah, well, they were popular in Holland.
Well, that's because they originated over in Europe.
Yeah, I think they were actually
Swedish or something.
Yeah, Baltic,
something like that. Yeah. In there, anyways. But yeah, but used to do a lot of other creative things too. Like in one of the houses we lived in before we moved up to this area that I call home now, we lived in a century-old farmhouse. It wasn't a farm because there were houses built around it, but a small community. And we had one of those big old spanky gang wooden fences, the things you see in our gang movies, the wooden fence that kids crawl through, the little hinged part goes up. We had one of those, and it had a hinged part on it as well. And we used to put on puppet shows in the summer from there and charge a penny for that. We did all kinds of stuff, but that was way it. But it was all creative. Or we draw things inside of the doghouse. Okay, well, it was fun. We're inside the doghouse. We kicked the dog out and drew pictures on the walls of the doghouse inside. But we had an imagination. I think that's what the point is. I think we have had more imagination because that was the only way we could keep ourselves entertained. We had to use our imagination. We didn't have videos or even 112,000 channels on TV or YouTube. We had to keep ourselves entertained, so we had to use our imagination to play with things. And so then that carried on into the teen years. Now, my teen years, I was experimenting with all kinds of crafty things. I did macrame for a while. I did candle making.
Well, I think I did that at one point too.
Yeah, I did a lot of that. I even went from door to door trying to sell my creations, and I called myself Occasional Candles. And people thought that meant, candles for all occasions. No, my father kind of named it because he said, well, you see, when I first started making candles, I made one in a tin can. I saw something in a book in the library or something, no YouTube, right? And it said you greased a can, like a can with canned vegetables came in or something like that, cleaned it out, greased it with cooking oil, melted down some paraffin wax. Remember, paraffin wax you used to buy in the grocery store? It was actually a lot used by people a lot for sealing canning, for sealing mason jars and stuff when they had stuff in them. I remember my mother using it when she would be canning. They'd put a layer of this on top as a seal and whatnot. So you could buy these boxes of this stuff, and you'd melt it down, and I poured it in the can, put in a wick. I think there was a place called Lewis Craft in those days, and you used to get a lot of, I got a lot of candle making supplies from them. Actually, they were not a storefront in our area. They were mail order, no internet. Actually had to fill out a,
They had a loose
kind
craft in any Oshawa shop.
yeah, they did years later, but that was after I was an adult.
Okay.
When that one came on, they didn't have it when I was a kid. Um, and made these candles. Even learned how to whip wax. So I made this one candle in a can that looked like an ice cream sundae kind of a thing. I was very proud of it. The neighbor next door, she saw, she said, "Oh, I love that. I love it." So I gave it to her. Well, she burned it for quite a while, except one time she's burning it and it blew up. It went up like a volcano, and I guess apparently wax was hanging off her ceiling and the whole bit. What we figured what happened was I used a lot of cooking oil to get these suckers out of the can. And I think an air pocket formed when the wax was cooling, and some of the oil somehow had gotten into that oil pocket, and then the wax sealed over top of it. But when it was melting down, it got to that little pocket. It broke through. The oil got heated up, and it, because there was nowhere for it to go, it went out the weakest point. So that's why my father says, yeah, they're called occasional candles because occasionally they blow up. That was not good for business when my father told people that. But I got real elaborate into candle making. I got more stuff. I'd stop using tin cans. I got real molds and the whole bit. And I think all my candle making stuff's in the crawl space. Or did we
I
finally
don't
get
know.
rid of
We
it?
may have gotten rid of it.
We probably did. I'm not making candles anymore. No. Although apparently that's trendy now. People are making, but they're making them in containers, like Yankee candles, or what do they call those things with scents. I did that. I did silk screening. I tried my hand at that. That was a mess.
I actually went to a school that taught shops, and we did silk screening in the school. So
see, I never had that opportunity because in my high school, they may have done it in art class, but we didn't have an industrial section of the school. So
yeah, and then that led me into doing photography. I did my own photography for a while. I did my own developing. I developed black and white photos, and then later I developed colored photos from negatives and film and that. And that was kind of interesting. It was messy, but it was interesting. I had my own dark room. I had a larger.
I wanted to do that.
Obviously, all that stuff has gone by the wayside with digital processing and stuff like that.
I wanted to do that. My mother wouldn't let me do it. It'll be too messy.
Oh, my parents let me do anything I wanted to do.
No, everything I touched, my mother would go, "Don't make a mess. I don't want a mess." So everything I did was, well, usually most of the stuff I did was messy to start with. But yeah, but at least, I always had an interest in being a maker, making things.
And at one point in time, I wanted to be a photographer.
Oh.
When I was
Did you like photography?
Yeah,
and
instead of what I ended up doing. So but that didn't really go anywhere with me, and I'm sort of glad I didn't get into it, because at later years with digital photography, it would screw up my latter part of my career. So
yeah. But, now I wondered though, I would think now photography, because it's an ancient art, but you have to get
there are still people that do film for effects and stuff like that. And I don't know if they would do color or if they would mostly do black and white, but I imagine the chemicals are hard to get.
They're probably hard to get, and probably extremely
very expensive. Yeah.
Now for that. So yeah, I played around with a lot of stuff. I did learn how to knit, sort of. That was short-lived, because the reason I learned how to knit was I joined the knitting club when I was in grade 7 or grade 8 at the school I was in. And the idea, yeah, they had a knitting club. There were boys in it and girls. It was
Mhm.
kind of progressive, but the idea was we were making these squares. We learned how to knit a square, and then the teacher was going to take the squares, or somebody was going to take all the squares and knit and put them all together to make an Afghan, and we were going to donate it to well, we had a psychiatric hospital in the area. We called it the Funny
So
Farm.
crazy quilt.
Yeah, crazy quilt. Yeah. So yeah, so those were in the days of Fentex wool, which wasn't wool, it was a polyester synthetic, and it was all the rage because it was cheap and people were making slippers out of it and all kinds of things.
Yeah, slippers that'll kill you.
Yeah, that's right. They
Yes.
were killer slippers because this stuff was slippery. You go on to step on a slippery floor and whoops, there you go. Yeah, that's why they stopped making that
Yeah.
stuff. I don't know. But anyway, so I'm knitting this thing, but my square was becoming a triangle because I was having a hard time keeping stitches
I
on the
think it's
needle.
because the polyester that was used in those days was a really raw type of polyester, and now the polyester that you get now feels more like wool. So
Yeah, well, you would have liked polyester in those days then because you were a firebug anyways. Hey, let's see if this melts. Let's see if you put it on your head and what it's going to do to you. Yeah, whatever. So, the story with my short-lived knitting career was that so I pulled all this stuff out. I realized my square was becoming a triangle, so I ripped it all back to get back to where it was square and carry on with it. But in the process, I cut the yarn and I left it sitting in a tray. It was an ashtray. My parents didn't smoke. Nobody smoked in my family, but you know, it was fashionable to have an ashtray in case people came over and you let them smoke in your house. But I just piled them all up in this ashtray on this end table and went to bed at some point in time. Well, a few days later, our cat was not feeling very well and stopped eating and the whole bit. So we took the vet or the cat to the vet. The vet had just graduated from the vet college at the University of Guelph. He was in with his father in the town, Whitby, the town we lived in at the time. So this was really his first case. They x-rayed the cat and whatnot and discovered that the cat had swallowed some of that wool and it had perforated through some of its intestines and it was tangling them up and choking them, cutting them off. It was going to kill them, basically. Well, you know, we were all upset about that. And so my parents said to the vet, we were interrupted by a call from Walter's sister. So we're back on this. So, anyways, they operated on the cat. They took out a foot in total of his intestine. The doctor, the vet didn't think he would probably live through it. And it probably cost my parents quite a lot of money for that. Cat lived. Yep. Of course, mind you, the cat never weighed any more than 7 pounds because everything it ate went right through because it had missing a foot of its intestine. Well, in bits and pieces here and everything. But anyways, that ended my knitting career. Didn't do that again. I'm a hazard to small animals when it comes to knitting. So I took up crochet. My grandmother showed me how to crochet, and I did a lot of it. And I did that all the way through to university, too. In fact, I remember when I was in teacher's college for Christmas, I made my brother an Afghan with that. And I got really good in crocheting. I made very intricate doilies from patterns that like pineapple doilies they were called the style. Like I'm not talking here just the little round things, like big jobbies. And then I eventually just kind of drifted away from that. In fact, recently, as you probably remember, I tried to take it up again. Yeah, no, it's boring. I'm sorry. I mean, crocheting is a lot of fun for those who like it, but I don't hate it. I just, yeah, I'd rather quilt. So I did a lot of those kind of things over the years. And then I moved into, well, I discovered the wonderful world of scrapbooking. In about 2002, I went to visit a friend of mine who had just come back from a European trip, and she's showing me her pictures, and she had them all in these albums, and she had little fun looking little stickers and different ways of displaying pictures in it. And I said to her, oh, this is really cool. Now, I didn't think much of it because she was an elementary school teacher, and, you know, elementary school teachers are into that kind of, you know, let's put a sticker on it because everybody loves a sticker and everything like that. And she said, no, it's called scrapbooking. Oh, it's scrapbooking. well, the only kind of scrapbook I knew of was the kind, used to be those brown paper things and you put newspaper clippings in them or something like that. Um, and she says, "Oh no, it's a whole thing." And what? She says, "You want to meet the lady?" I said, "There's a lady?" She says, "Yeah, her dealer in scrapbooking." At that time, it was called Creative Memories, and it was a business. It was sort of the Tupperware of scrapbooking. It was very popular. So she phones up the lady. We went over to her house, and $450 later, I was a scrapbooker too. And I came home with all this stuff to Walter. Says, "You'll never guess what I bought." And he goes,
And I said, "You spent how much?"
And what are you going to do with that crap? I said, "Scrapbook." And I did. And I did a lot of scrapbooks. This one I've got just opened here as an example. I moved into digital scrapbooking. I did traditional for a long time, and then I started to get into doing it all through my computer. I even bought a wide format printer to be able to print out 12 by 12 inch pages and the whole bit. That's kind of an example of it. And yeah, did you think I've got a lot of scrapbooks? All of those are scrapbooks. Do I ever look at them anymore? Nope. I scrapbooked everything. I even went to classes. They called them crops, kind of like a quilting retreat, only for scrapbookers. And I met some nice people there. And of course, it was very much dominated by ladies as well. But I really enjoyed it because it was something different. It wasn't just putting in pictures in an album. It was being creative about how you displayed the pictures and what you wrote. I even taught classes on scrapbooking and things like that. And then when I retired, for the first couple of years after I retired, I was working at a scrapbook store as well. But we know what all happened with that, don't we? After I cleaned all that stuff out. So you did well, I was going to say here. Okay, so scrapbooking led me to paper crafts in general. And so I did collage work. That's just one I never threw out. I got into paint pouring at one point. Bit of a glare on that one. I got into all kinds of things. 3D paper sculptures, journals, album making, a bunch of albums there. I had a lot more than that at one point in time. These were just the ones I never got rid of. So yeah, I went nuts in the paper craft world. And of course I got into art journaling. I started to teach classes in art journaling. And until recently, I had a group that was still meeting on a regular basis. We were doing it by Zoom because of COVID for art journaling. But then I discovered quilting. But what about you, Walter?
Well, where's that in the teenage years? Well, you're just showing that now, right? So, and in the teenage years, I did photography. That's mainly the thing that I did. I got really interested in photography, and I did that. And I did my own developing, and then I started working full time. And when I started working full time, a lot of my craft type stuff sort of I stopped doing because it was I worked in Toronto, and it took me a long time to commute back and forth to Toronto, and I just didn't really have the time to or the motivation to do anything much. Later on, in probably my late 30s, I started doing knitting. My mom was beginning to lose her eyesight, and so I thought, and she always knitted, and I thought I went through a period where I'd like to learn how to knit. So she taught me how to knit, and I knitted a few sweaters. I threw most of them out since I went for a couple of years when I was knitting, but they stopped fitting. I got bigger and I stopped fitting me. So I thought, well, why am I hanging on to these? And I ended up discarding them. But now I'm kind of sorry I did, because I would have liked to show an example. You made some
beautiful sweaters. You did.
Yeah, I did a cable knit sweater, and I did one with patterns in it and stuff like that. And then I think the thing that turned me off the knitting is that my sister decided, well, since I could knit so good, I could make her a sweater, because she tried to knit and she didn't really like it. and I could make her this elaborate sweater. So she went out and bought all this wool, and she gave me this horrible pattern to knit, which was like really difficult to follow. And
She did that on purpose.
yeah, and I
She's a
got
bitch.
about 3/4 of the way through, and I said, "To hell with this! I can't do this any longer." And I put it away, and I told her, I said, "I can't do this. It's too much for me." And that turned me right off of knitting. So, but you know, I didn't really do a lot of other crafting for quite a while. I did. I mean, I worked full time. Sometimes I was pretty busy with that, and I didn't feel like doing anything else. And or I do odd things around the house, like I built the surround underneath the deck here, and I did some other stuff for around the house and stuff like that, which was more carpentry related type of thing. And so I did that sort of thing. I tiled the backsplash in the kitchen, things like that, right? So, but
Handyman.
yeah, I did that sort of more handyman kind of stuff. And then I went, then I always had this love for stained glass. And it was really when in the 2000s that I started, I went to a couple of classes in a town close to us, Pickering, and took a few classes of that. And then I stopped for a little bit because I'm not sure if it was because my mom went in a nursing home or my sister got sick, and I ended up getting busy with that. And then, but then later afterwards, I went back in about 2009, actually after my mom passed away, really, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I started going to a stained glass store in Whitby, which is the town next to us, and taking classes there. And I did a few items in stained glass. One of the examples are here. I did a few windows, and then I did a Tiffany lamp. Oh yeah, and I forgot about that. In my early years, skipping back in my early years,
he was a hooker
when I was living at home with my parents before I met Steve. I started doing. A friend of my parents would get these rug hooking kits from a company called Skillcraft, and they were quite elaborate and they're quite expensive, and they were 100% wool. And so I made a few of these types of rugs using these kits. They took quite a while to do, and it kept me occupied. I do a little bit at a time, and make these, and they were kind of fun to do at the time.
and you made one that was a huge
I made one that took me over a year to do, and it's I think it's about 9 foot by 9 foot. No, it's about 10 by 13 foot rug. It's a huge rug.
I hate it.
Yeah, he doesn't like it. Actually, at the time, I really liked it, but
Well, I don't hate it. I know how much effort it took to make it and everything like that. It's just that the design of it and the whole bit just didn't go with our decor.
yeah. Well, not only that, these rugs are really thick. They're almost like a shag. And so, but anyway, I did that for a while to keep me occupied when I was in my early 20s, I think.
You know, I just had an idea looking at this one. I mean, I see this one every day because it's down here in my sewing room. It's been down here for forever. I really like this one, but I'm looking at that and thinking, you know, that could be done as a really neat applique design on a quilt, or as a quilt design.
Or convert it to embroidery.
Yeah, or something like that, you know.
Yeah.
Potential there for that. But then in your stained glass,
I also did some lamps in stained glass. I also did something called fusing. If you looked at next to the lamp, there's a dish there,
and there's another one over underneath the candles.
That is using a kiln and fusing glass. So that was kind of interesting to do as well. So
yeah, well, the other thing too with the candle sitting on, that one's fused as well. That was
fused as well.
That you did it too. Actually, the fusing glass, I went with Walter. There was a special session or something one time over at the place where he was doing his classes, and I went and we were doing fusing. I made a few little, nothing as elaborate as this, and I got kind of interested in it. But you see, my problem with these kind of things is I want it to own a kiln.
Yeah.
And, to
Well,
own a,
the kilns are expensive.
yeah,
Well, they're not terribly expensive items,
well, we
but
didn't really have the
they take
space
up a
for it.
lot of room, and you have to have them hooked into high power
Yeah,
and stuff like
and
that.
that kind of thing. And also, they did have a little kiln that you put in your microwave for small pieces of fused
But
glass.
that's only if you're making like
Well, little
items
tiny like
for
jewelry or something,
jewelry or
and
something.
things like that. But that kind of fascinated me, that kind of thing. The only thing is, stained glass, always like stained glass, but I don't want to work with it because I would be a bloody mess.
Yeah, the one problem with doing stained glass is that you always end up with cuts on your hands. So
But you still have a lot of stained
yes,
glass
I do.
around too.
I mean, I could go back and do
Yeah.
it.
And this is your piece of resistance here.
Yeah, that's the one and only Tiffany reproduction lamp that I did, and I really like that lamp.
Yeah, I know it's a great lamp. It's in our kitchen area and that whole bit. But that had how many pieces in it?
It has 425 pieces in it, all put together, and you have to cut them all out yourself and then grind them all down and
And
fit
you had
them
to
on.
fit them on a
I
form, didn't
have
you? With
a styrofoam mold, and they fit on top of that.
and you had to pin it or something, or what
Yeah,
was
you have
it?
to pin all the glasses to. I know it sounds weird. You can't actually pin through the glass. You have to pin around the edges of the glass and hold them in place. You have a pattern that you have on top of the lamp, and you have to pin each piece onto the pattern. And you can't actually pin right through the glass. You have to pin around the edges of the glass so that it holds the glass into place. And you need to use glass head pins for that uh, because if you when you solder the whole thing together, you have to make sure your pins aren't going to melt when you put them together, right? So I needed about 1,400 glass head pins to put that together. So
And then one year too, at Christmas time or something, you made a bunch of little like catchers, light catchers or something.
yeah,
Remember
sun
those
catchers, yeah,
that you made for people and stuff?
yeah,
It was all kind of nice. And then you did this.
yeah. It's a mosaic table that I did on a slab of wood, and you cut all the pieces out, and you actually grout. It's sort of like putting tiles in. You have to grout around the edges. You stick all the pieces on the pattern, and then grout around it. So I did that. I also did you can see it peeking out at the top there.
Oh yeah, those stones. I forgot about that.
Actually a patio stone with embedded stained glass in it.
I forgot all about that. I should have
Yeah.
taken a picture of that too. But yeah, we've got you've done about 6 lamps, haven't you? We've got 2 down here. We've got one upstairs.
Yeah.
There's 2 in the bedroom. There's another one in the other. Yeah,
Yeah.
about 6. You did about 6 different lamps
Yeah.
too, as well.
And I still have the stuff that I can do that if I need
Yeah.
to.
So yeah, you should just more.
Yeah,
Oh.
probably should. I probably should go do some more of that instead of always sewing too. So
Well, whatever. But yeah, so you can see that we've done a lot of things over the years. So how's that all lead us into sewing and quilting? Well, you want to know something? I think that all these things that we did in the past, at least for me, kind of led up to quilting, because when I was doing macrame and knitting and crochet, I was working with textiles, with fabric, or not fabric, but with fibers and things. And, picking colors and construction. So I learned that. I learned about with scrapbooking. I learned about color combinations and how to, use the color wheel and things like that, which are skills that you use when you're making a quilt or even a garment kind of a thing. So all those things that I did led up to that, and I think the same with you. Stained glass. I
yeah,
mean, stained glass is pretty close to like quilting
yeah.
in a way.
And also, like for getting into sewing, I always had like, I mean, you really latched on to quilting. For me, I didn't really appeal to me quite as much, but I always had a fascination for sewing shirts and things like that. So that's where I ended up getting into more of the garment stuff, and maybe my background from when I was a kid, my helping my mom cut her patterns out
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
Yeah. So all these things do contribute to what you may end up actually doing later on. And in fact, Walter was talking about he didn't maybe do as much when he was working because, his work didn't lend itself to that kind of creativity, a different kind of creativity because he was a programmer. So he had to be a little bit creative there. But for me, as a teacher, I was always bringing crafting into my classroom. Yeah, I taught English, but English was the best subject to teach for this kind of stuff outside of art because I use scrapbooking. I actually wrote curriculum to show other teachers how to use certain aspects of scrapbooking to enhance the curriculum they were teaching in an English classroom. I ran workshops on that on PD days. Um, I had an old form of a die cutting machine in my classroom that I had bought that I let the kids use for different projects and things that they were doing. Um, I did a lot of very creative things, and because my job lent that self to me, that's why I liked my
Yeah,
job.
actually, my job was that way too, in that I would have to create software for a specific problem at work to
Mm.
solve a computer type problem, or also if software went stopped working, I had to investigate how why it was not working properly and how to fix it type of thing. So there was a lot of thought processes that had to go through to both create software and to fix software over the years. So that still is if in the even in sewing and stuff like that, if something goes wrong with the machine or something like that, you still have to sort of figure out what's going on with that type of thing. And my background with that, with mechanics and tinkering and everything else, it all sort of blends.
Yeah, it does. You learn stuff. I feel sorry for these kids today, though, because a lot of them, because of technology, I think technology in some ways for certain kids is stifling any creativity they may have because we used to make up stories when we were kids and reenact them and act them out because we used our imagination. Now the stories are being given to them on in a video game and shoot 'em up kind of thing in that kind of deal. So it's not really necessarily engaging their creative imagination on that. Um, Kids don't seem like a computer will do everything for them. Now,
Yeah, even in the software industry and stuff, and that's probably where we're running into problems with some of the software that's developed for computers is that I found that the younger people were not as creative
you know,
in solving problems and things like that.
that's key is creative problem solving. In fact, when I was teaching school, we had a whole movement that happened at one point in my career called we had to develop creative, no, critical thinking skills is what they called them. And I would set up exercises in my classroom where kids would be presented with some kind of a problem, and I don't mean a mathematical problem per se, some kind of a problem, and they had to find a creative solution for it. Or sometimes I'd throw random things onto their desk. They'd be in a group and say, "You have half an hour to do something with this. You can do whatever you want with it, but it has to be something that these things that I've thrown on your desk were not intended for." And they would come up with, they at first groan, "Oh, that's effort." And I said, "Yes, it is." And do it. And then afterwards, they, "Well, why did we do that?" And I said, "Because now you know how to solve a problem. You were given a problem, you had to use your imagination to figure it out. So now we're going to transfer that skill into your writing with it as well. Different levels of writing. You know, can you take a simple sentence and make it into something a little bit more elaborate? Well, how do you do that? You have to use your imagination. You have to play with words and stuff. So, I guess everything that I started as a kid worked very well into the career that I was in and is working well for me now, as far as I'm concerned. Keeps me amused, keeps us going. And I think that's important. You've heard me say that before. I really strongly believe that as you grow older, you have to keep your mind going. You have to be engaged and always looking beyond things. You gotta problem solve, because otherwise you're just gonna die. I know. That's what happened to my parents. I said creativity, I think, skips a generation. So, anyways, that was something a little different today about, so chatty. We didn't really talk so much about, sewing or quilting. To be honest, we're running out of topics. You've heard me say that before. So, if you have a suggestion, please put it in the comments below or send me an email, something you'd want us to talk about or explore a little further on So Chatty, because we definitely need some topics with it. So anyways, yep. I hope you got something out of this. I hope you found it at least somewhat entertaining and interesting, and that you're still with us. You may not have gotten, if anything, we may have put you to sleep, and maybe you need to sleep. So, okay. Anything you want to add?
No, we're good.
Okay, we're good. All right. So thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next week. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.